You know, sometimes whenever I feel not myself, I look at my hands and I make sure that I can feel my own face. It helps me remember that I'm actually real, though sometimes I question whether the things outside of my perspective are real. Sometimes I stand there questioning whether or not the experiences I'm having aren't actually a mass hallucination cooked up on my brain, and I'm actually going through cycle after cycle after cycle of brain death, each time remembering things slightly differently. Disassociation, after all, is how the mind copes with too much stress, disconnecting and ensuring that there's a lack of continuity of memories, surroundings, actions, and identity. Now, I'd like to nominate disassociation as the mental illness symptom of the year. Now, I'm not actually dissociating. Actually, I'm not dissociating because of stress or trauma, but the sheer realization that everyone that I've met is probably, most likely, most definitely, probably not real. And the consequences of shooting someone that I've just met is probably non-existent. Anyway, today's subject is SIGNALIS, an indie game made by two people that I've followed since its announcement in 2018, released a few months ago, and even though I'm late to the topic, it's been a phenomenal game that I've played multiple times already. I'm a huge fan of old-style survival horror, fixed cameras and one-shot-at-a-time gameplay, and while that sounds like something a guy who collects Funko Pops and makes video game reviews on YouTube into a Blue Yeti microphone would say, I'm sitting here genuinely impressed by what SIGNALIS was. Not many games typically stay with me as much as SIGNALIS did, and I have an immense amount of respect for the work developers Rose Engine have created. Two passionate developers producing one of my favorite indie games in several years. Story. In the year 1950X, Germany rises to power as one of the dominant countries in the world. Fast forward 50 years or so, Angela Merkel is actually not elected prime minister. Germany, and by extension their best friend Japan, post-nuclear Vietnam War II, manages to perfect space travel, and humanity takes to the stars. Germany manages to find a new solar system, and they begin to claim it as their own. A German Vietnamese mommy ends up ascending to godhood and enables space Germany to prosper, going to the farthest reaches of the solar system to establish homes, cities, and mining stations. German becomes the spoken language, and humans have begun calling themselves Gestalts for the aesthetic. As time goes on, cheap and manual labor is no longer befitting of the German-Vietnamese master race. Gestalts have figured out how to take themselves and create a bioorganic robotic copy of themselves, and copy over their consciousness, mass-producing many kinds of replicas. Now, replicas, they come in many shapes and sizes, and by many shapes and sizes, all of them would have wide breeding hips, thigh gaps, and they lack feet. Quentin Tarantino and Hidetaka Miyazaki would probably be genuinely upset with this game. Foot fetishists are, in fact, not eating good tonight. Each model type has tics and mannerisms borrowed from their original gestalt, and many of their mental states are kept in check with items or behaviors. Yule units, for example, are kept in line by having music and mirrors in their rooms so they can check themselves out. Storches relax by bathing, showering, or reading fine literature. They can also be incredibly fucking schizophrenic. And if not catered to, unstable replica units display all sorts of unique symptoms. Colibris, for example, experience severe persona degradation, which may as well be robot dementia. Boy, do I love identity death, and the death of the soul. I swear to God, I'm actually real. Now, horny VTuber fans can appreciate auras, construction worker bee units that have been described as quiet simpletons. They are judgmental and gossip among their peers. To best complete their construction and repair jobs, auras construct service tunnels that only they can access. These are under floors and are literally in your walls. Unstable units will retreat into said tunnels, never to return. It's actually advised to never retrieve them and let them die off. Now, understanding the difference between gestalts and replicas is the foundation of characters in the world of SIGNALIS. You play as Elster, one of many LSTR replica units. You find yourself on a surreal mining outpost as you search for someone. An infection's going around, turning cute anime robot waifus into rusted and fleshy monsters, and humans into dead, goopy paste. While the obvious answer is that the cure is a bullet to the head, much like the words of a woman, you learn that the reality you're going through is not to be taken literally. Characters are seemingly aware of this displacement in reality. Some will mention that there's something wrong with the days and their memories, and the game actively plays loose and reckless with the idea of canonicity. Did the Penrose really crash? Is what you're playing through actually real? What's with the red eye that people keep mentioning? Why do I see versions of myself over the course of the game? This game is heavily narrative focused, and you find yourself the kind of person to say, hey, I really like reading the item descriptions in Dark Souls, you'll probably really like this game. It takes a bit to piece together, but for the sake of having the game leave a more poignant taste in your mouth, I'd rather not spoil, because much of this game is left up to interpretation. Gameplay. If you're familiar with old-style survival horror, much of the gameplay loop is exploring an area, discovering shortcuts, keys, unlockable doors with said keys, slow combat, and resource management with a limited inventory space. You can't carry much in this game, meaning that inventory management and resource management are vital. Like classic Resident Evil, you'll be obtaining keys to unlock doors to reach new locations to gather more items, all while dodging and fighting your way past corrupted replicas. Each area typically has a major door that you're finding keys for, and each item is typically obtained through exploration or puzzle solving. Oh yeah, puzzles. Nothing here really is too hard, and typically solutions can be found through exploration or some thinking, but nothing too hard or impossible where you'll be stuck. You wouldn't actually look up a guide though, would you? You're not fucking stupid, are you? You're not a dumb piece of shit troggle. That being said, there are some really standout puzzles in the game. I mentioned exploration being a part of the puzzle solving experience, but the game likes to throw clues at you that build on the logic of a puzzle. Take for example one of the lock pads in this game. You have a radio in this game that tunes in the frequencies. Over the course of the game, frequencies provide information that can be used to solve puzzles. This lockbox has a picture of a sword on it. Earlier, you find a note that mentions frequencies associated with certain items. You tune into said frequency and get greeted with a sequence of numbers. You go back to the lock pad and discover that the keypad is composed of letter keys instead of number keys. You find a note that translates numbers into letters. When you return, the letters are scrambled, meaning you have to figure out the correct sequence of letters that translates to the right number, with one of the letters being unknown. In truth, this is a really simple puzzle, but it requires multiple steps and layers to complete. Many puzzles in SIGNALIS follow this kind of logic, and I find it pretty enjoyable to complete each one. Information is conveyed to the player really well, and I never felt as if I was lost given that I had explored and considered each possibility I had at a given time. I'd personally recommend playing with a notepad because it makes things significantly easier. Replicas have limited fields of vision, with their bioorganic parts rotted away and their innards rusting. You'll spend much of the game trying to avoid them and sneak past them. They're attracted to noise and sources of light. Though the game does have a minor focus on stealth, you're not actually given a lot of tools for sneaking around. No noisemakers or distractions, and if you get spotted, every enemy in the room will be alerted. Your main line of defense? Guns. While ammo conservation is still important, the game does give you options, and blasting your way through replicas is still pretty fun. The longer you have a chance to aim, the more focused your shot becomes, ensuring that the bullet connects with the replica's soft and delicate cranium. Thankfully, Elster is pretty smart, and enemies can be shoved away if too close. And unlike classic survival horror on the PlayStation 1, the game doesn't feel as claustrophobic due to the camera angles and ability to shove enemies away. Enemy health is fairly moderate, taking anywhere from one well-placed shot to the head to half a magazine to incapacitate. Once knocked over, they'll spasm like an epileptic playing SIGNALIS, which, by the way, if you're epileptic, quick warning, look away. Anyway, once you incapacitate a replica, remember to always politely kick your enemies while they're down. They'll stay dead as you go from room to room. However, enemies don't actually stay dead, and the only permanent solution? Thermite. Thermite burns at 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Rotted flesh ignites and bubbles, and rusted metal melts and fuses with the floor, and whatever you burn probably won't be getting back up. You only have a limited amount of thermite flares though, so you have to use them wisely. Or don't. I can't really tell you what to do or not do, but you know, burning shit's fun. Fun fact, you can actually equip the thermite flares as a melee sub-item. This puts the focus on expanding resources to ensure backtracking and navigation is easier, with you as the player making calculated risks to reward yourself. Guns come in a variety of shapes and sizes, ranging from your average 10mm handgun, an over-under hunting rifle, and a flare gun that doubles as a grenade launcher. Each one has their uses, and the game provides enough ammo to make each one shine. The rifle punches through armor and shields, while the flare gun can permanently kill enemies or incapacitate a whole group. You'll be assessing what tools you need to clear each room. Presentation. SIGNALIS' presentation is pretty top-notch. Going for an isometric top-down perspective, it uses lighting and darkness very, very well. In gameplay, it graphically looks very crunchy, as if you were playing it on a CRT monitor, but it shines when you examine objects and puzzles. Additionally, the glitch effects are very, very comfortable, giving the atmosphere an unsettling edge. The game features phenomenal sound design, and a very comfortable and ambient soundtrack. Utilizing an anime art style, much of SIGNALIS' cast comes off incredibly pretty. Much of the anime cutscenes and still frames are given top-notch music, pacing, and build-up to being one of the most keynote games I've ever played. This game has a very cinematic atmosphere, and ultimately refers back to the old adage that boys play video games with real men. Real men watch them. Criticism. Take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt, because the criticisms I'm about to say are honestly petty in the wake of an amazing game. My major issues center around inventory rules. You can carry 6 items, and I personally think this is a very fair number of inventory slots. Healing items stack, which saves a significant amount of space, but sub-items like the auto-injector, the disposable stun rods, and the flashlight take up inventory space. The sub-item issue mostly stems from the flashlight. Why is this part of my inventory and not permanently attached to my character? Elster doesn't even have toes, she can't even stub her fucking toes in the dark. Some rooms require you to have the flashlight, and the item alone makes exploration slightly easier. Losing an entire inventory slot because of this item or sub-items feels like a questionable decision. Ammo stacks are also very, very small, and while that's not exactly horrible because the game actively discourages super aggressive combat, endings depend entirely on how aggressively you play. Why can I only hold 2 additional magazines for my handgun? The game has an overwhelming abundance of key items, and small stacks makes collecting ammunition slightly more inconvenient, meaning that you'll be backtracking often to a safe room and depositing items into the item box. That small stack problem and the rules of an inventory management in this game actually get in the way of item collection. Handgun ammo is fairly ubiquitous, but caps at 20. You'll typically find 7 handgun bullets across every few rooms, but rather than creating a second stack of handgun bullets, you have to return to the item box to drop it off. In conjunction with the overabundance of sub-items, like the auto-injector and the stun rods, you'll constantly be running out of space, being unable to pick up important key items, and though the game has a lot of fun weapons to use, item collection will be more important, and I often found myself just dumping everything into the item box, but bringing the handgun just to pick up as many key items as possible. The game could have been slightly simpler rather than sticking to the lore-based reasoning of the rule of 6. Sub-items shouldn't take up a slot, ammo stacks should be either slightly larger, or a second stack should be created to discourage repetitive backtracking, or the inventory should have just been expanded to hold 8. Ultimately, as I mentioned, these problems don't make Signalis a bad game to play. In fact, I actually give it a full recommendation, and I recommend going in completely blind. It left me with a lot of striking imagery, and encouraged me to go out of my way and look up its influences, whether it be the Isle of the Dead painting, and the Lovecraftian and King in Yellow influences, and the contexts in which they were written. It says a lot when much of the game's own logic causes much of your thinking to question what is to be taken literally and what is to be taken figuratively. Much of the story is then left up to the interpretation of the player. And the core of Signalis is this tragic and poignant and beautiful game, and I hope that you consider checking it out if given the chance. Currently, it's available on Windows, Xbox, PlayStation 4, and the Nintendo Switch for about $20. You should buy it. Please buy it. This is the end of the review. If you've watched this far, thank you. There'll be more content to come. Please check out my links in the description and check out my streams on Twitch. Take it easy, and as always, get the fuck off my roof. Have a good one.
It's gonna give this sauce a taste.
Oh, okay. There is meat in there.
That's why these are frozen noodles, not dried. Yeah, that is incredible. So these are pork noodles.
Wow.
Let me get some scallions. So I'll say this, I would rewrite